And why a fast response force of first aiders is making all the difference. Good evening, welcome to the 6 o'clock news.
First tonight, a leader's challenge. Iain Duncan Smith went up to the podium today knowing he had to deliver the speech of his life. Speaking at his party conference, the Tory leader took aim at critics inside his own party. Get on board or get out of our way, he told them. He also turned his anger on Tony Blair, calling him a liar. The speech won several standing ovations from the party faithful in Blackpool. Our political editor, Andrew Marr, was there.
It's hard and lonely being an opposition leader under siege. You get up each morning never knowing quite who's a friend and who is not. You take up arms against a sea of troubles, surrounded by smiles, some warm, some treacherous. But today, Iain Duncan Smith won himself some time and kept his circling, shadowy assassins at bay. And he did it with his best speech yet.
My mission is to take this Conservative Party back to government, and I won't allow anything or anyone to stand in my way. For we must destroy this double-dealing, deceitful, incompetent, shallow, inefficient, ineffective, corrupt, mendacious, fraudulent, shameful, lying government once and for all.
Shameful? Lying? What about those Tories still plotting against him too?
And to those who doubt and those who deliberate, I say this: don't work for Tony Blair. Get on board or get out of the way, for we have work to do.
But his most striking passages were highly personal attacks on the other party leaders. He called David Kelly's death the Prime Minister's blackest act, which shamed Britain.
Immediately after Dr. David Kelly's death, Tony Blair said that he had nothing to do with the strategy for his public naming. That was a lie.
Mr. Blair should do the decent thing and resign. Then the Tory leader covered a wide range of policies, promising to cut taxes and describing the asylum system as a disaster.
While Tony Blair is travelling the world is travelling here.
Once Europe would have dominated a Duncan Smith speech, not now, though he did promise a national campaign for a referendum on the proposed European constitution, and he echoed a former Labour leader.
I promise you this: I will fight, fight, fight and fight again to save the country that I love.
Most of the speech was grimly serious. Not all. Here's an IDS you haven't seen, mimicking Tony Blair.
Oh, last week, he ended that speech with an air of omnipotence. Let it be done.
They laughed and applauded that. Actually, they applauded almost everything. There were no fewer than 18 standing ovations, most of them primed by party officials and exhausting some of the audience. Just like Labour's conference, this was stage-managed to boost the leader. The Tories here genuinely liked the speech. They think the quiet man's getting angry.
Listen. Just listen. You can hear, steady as a heartbeat, the hurt and anger of the people of this country. This Labour government cannot hear them above the racket of its own spin and the rattle of its own demise. But I have heard them. I have heard their anger.
So, was this enough to save him? Grassroots Tories hate the idea of their elected leader being shoved out of public life in a secretive coup. And tonight, the Tory chief whip had this message for the plotters.
If you're not going to back the shadow cabinet and all the junior shadow ministers who work their backsides off and the backbenchers on committees, if you're not going to back the thousands of Conservative chairmen and workers who've come here today, then continue your alternative career outside Parliament.
So now the party disperses. But next week, its MPs return to Parliament. For them, it's make your mind up time.
Andrew, your report there ended on that tough message to the rebels. Is it going to do the trick, though?
Well, it's hard to say. I think at the moment the Tory party is now sort of scattering to the four winds, and over the weekend a lot of local Tory party members and officials will be talking to each other and to their MPs saying, are you part of this plot or not? What Iain Duncan Smith hopes is that when they get back to Westminster next week, they frankly haven't got the bottle for it. And if he wins a few weeks before this challenge comes, then he might have won the time up to Christmas. And if he's done that, then frankly, he'll be leader of the Tory party into the next election.
I mean, it's as if there were a division between ordinary party members, the kind of people we saw in the hall, and Westminster, that some of the MPs.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is partly about who owns the Conservative Party. Is it the media? Is it the MPs at Westminster? Or is it the 350,000 ordinary members? Now, they lost a much greater leader, Margaret Thatcher, once before to a parliamentary coup, and it did terrible damage to this party. What would it do to the party if they lost their first democratically elected leader in the same way? It would be enormously damaging, and the rebels have to be very clear that they have a much better leader in waiting, I suspect, before they take that risk.
Andrew, thank you.
A former postman who's thought to be the world's most prolific internet groomer ever convicted has been jailed for 5 years. 64-year-old Douglas Lindsell tried to befriend around 70 children in the UK and abroad in internet chat rooms. James Westhead has the story.
He told me he was like my age, and he was just being really nice to me. He was trying to make me feel sorry for him.
This 14-year-old was one of an astonishing 73 girls tricked into believing their new chatroom friend was a teenage boy. In fact, it was this 64-year-old former postman, Douglas Lindsell. He tried to get girls to meet him. If they refused, his emails turned nasty.
Then he just started sending me horrible emails, threatening me.
What kind of things was he writing to you?
He was just saying, like, that I'm going to come and find you. I'm going to rape you.
This girl's mother believes she had a lucky escape.
He could have been a real threat to my daughter if he'd have come and found her. He, sat outside her school, followed her. Who knows what would have happened? It's very scary.
He did persuade 2 girls to meet him and tried to abduct one of them in his car. But when they saw he was an old man, they ran away. Disturbingly, say police, Lindsell built up detailed profiles on the girls, all underage.
Brown hair, brown eyes, 5 foot.
He even had a guide on teenage texting to get the right slang. But today a court jailed him for 5 years. A warning for all, say police.
Parents that allow their children to use the internet and communicate with strangers have got to watch them and supervise them and make sure what they do safely.
This girl and the others are lucky to escape with nothing more than a nasty scare. Now the police are asking teenagers and their parents to be more vigilant and warning there may still be more victims in what's thought to have been the world's largest case of so-called grooming on the internet. James Westhead, BBC News.
A quick look at some other stories making news tonight.
The Bank of England has kept interest rates at 3.5% for the 3rd month running. The cost of borrowing is at its lowest level for 48 years.
A man and a woman arrested in connection with the shooting of 7-year-old Tony Ann Byfield and her father in northwest London have been released on bail. They were questioned at separate police stations in London overnight.
Leeds United have suspended the player Jody Morris pending what the club describes as an internal investigation. Last night he was released on bail after being questioned about an alleged serious sexual assault on a woman.
6 months after the fall of Baghdad, and it's been another day of violence in Iraq, with at least 11 people killed in 3 separate attacks. The victims included Iraqi policemen, a Spanish diplomat and an American soldier. From Baghdad, Jill McGivering reports.
It was a suicide attack, the bomb hidden inside this car. Iraqi police were the target, but most of the dead were just civilians. This man said his father was a victim when US troops